This is our video for high leverage practices specifically related to collaboration. So for this part in this module, I would like for you to read pages 27 to 40 in your high leverage practice guide. So you provided this in the syllabus and also in this PowerPoint. So you'll read the specific part about collaboration. This is essentially our textbook this semester. So now is a good time to pause and to do that. So high leverage practices are a set of knowledge and skills needed to teach special education, and they're categorized into collaboration, assessment, social, emotional, and behavioral, and instruction. So I'm going to make a video about all four of these to explain the importance and the skills and knowledge related to each of the categories. For our practicum course, you're going to be developing a portfolio about how you actually use these practices in your practicum placement. So you'll be providing us with copies of evidence or artifacts about how you actually incorporate and use collaboration, assessment, social, emotional, and behavior strategies, as well as instruction. So this video is going to focus just on collaboration. So our high leverage practice 1 is collaborating with professionals to increase student success. So we have to, as special ed teachers, to collaborate with everyone, with gen ed teachers, with paraprofessionals, and with support staff. And that might be our aides, that might be our related services staff. So we know that many of our students will need related services, and if hopefully you remember, that's like our occupational therapy and our speech language therapy. And we have to collaborate with these professionals to make sure that our students are getting the individualized education and the support and accommodations that they need according to their individualized education plan. And so we're going to be talking about effective collaboration, and you'll notice on the screen it lists a few, like sharing ideas, being active listeners, questioning, planning, problem solving, and negotiating. We have to have all of these skills as special educators. So collaboration is how people work together, not what they do. So often this is a style that people will pick to accomplish a goal. And so sometimes collaboration is very fluid. You are familiar with each other and you've identified your strengths and weaknesses. And so perhaps when you're working together, like your task is related to your strengths, and if you're working with me, then the task that I have to do when we collaborate is related to my strengths. It's not just working in the same room as another person. It's very easy as a special ed teacher to say we're collaborating with our aides and our paraprofessionals, but if we're just working in the same room and we don't actually have active listening and engagement and problem solving, then we're actually not collaborating. True collaboration exists only when all participants on a team or another shared activity feel their contributions are valued and the goal is clear, when they share decision making, and when they sense they are respected. So here's the characteristics of collaboration. Collaboration is voluntary, it's based on parity, it requires a shared goal, it includes shared responsibility for decisions, and shared accountability for all outcomes. A continuation of the characteristics, collaboration is based on shared resources. It is emergent, meaning it takes time. It reflects on your personal beliefs. You're going to refine your interaction skills as you go, and it contributes to a supportive environment. So shared problem solving, or the needs, expectations, and ideas of all participants, must be blended into shared understanding and mutually agreed on solutions. So this might mean discovering a shared need, identifying the problem, proposing solutions, evaluating ideas, plan specifics, implement the solution, and evaluate the outcomes. Hopefully, as a SPED teacher, the shared problem solving, meaning the needs and identification of the problem, will be your desire to help the student, right? Both of you, or maybe the team, the entire team, if it's more than two people. Hopefully you've agreed that you all want to help the student, and that is your shared belief, and that will help you have shared problem solving. Another part of collaboration is co-teaching, and that is when it's typically gen ed and special ed teachers work together to teach students with and without disabilities. It can be, however, like a gen ed teacher and a specialist, so maybe the gen ed teacher and a speech language pathologist, but often you see it as a gen ed teacher and a special ed teacher in the same room, and there's different models of co-teaching. In a second, we'll talk about each model. And so these research remind us what co-teaching is not. Co-teaching is not one person teaching while another prepares materials, not one person's views dominate in instructional decision making. It's not tutoring, and it's not when one person watches while another teaches. Remember, these are two teachers, and that is meant to be when we call it co-teaching. We want both people teaching. So there's 6 types of co-teaching models that we're going to be talking about on the next couple of slides. The first one is one teach, one observe. So you'll notice the red dot, maybe that's the teacher. And so that one's leading the instruction in the gen ed classroom. And the blue dot is the one who's observing. And so this could be different ways or different models. So the red dot could be the gen ed teacher, and maybe it's a gen ed math class. And that person's really responsible for providing the content. And the ones observing, the blue dot, maybe that's the SPED teacher. And that person is just really observing what the students are doing, how they're grasping the content. Maybe they're collecting some data based on student engagement or student behavior, but really is one person kind of leading the content instruction and one person observing. It could also be vice versa, so the SPED teacher could be the one teaching, and the gen ed teacher could be the observer. Station teaching is when you have 3 stations. You have one station who's working with the SPED teacher, and another station is working with the gen ed teacher, and then another station is independent. And the goal of this is that students actually rotate, so they see both teachers and they have time to have some kind of independent activity. So I always think of math class, a really good station teaching option. So maybe there's an activity at the red dot, maybe there's a game at the blue dot, and then there's something independent like a worksheet in the middle. Parallel teaching is when you actually split your students in half, and one teacher works with half the class and the other teacher works with the other half of the class. The composition of students may vary, so if the blue dot is the SPED teacher, then maybe the students with IEPs are in her group. If the red dot's the gen ed teacher, maybe she has the kids who need enrichment or maybe have identified as gifted, talented. Or what I like even better is that the students in both groups have both exceptionalities. They're gifted and they have disabilities, so they can help each other. But it really probably depends on the teachers, but more importantly, the composition of the class and what they need based on the topic and standard that they're covering. Alternative teaching is when the red dot, probably the gen ed teacher, is teaching the majority of the class, and the blue dot, probably the SPED teacher, is teaching just a few students, almost like a pull-out support, but within the same classroom. And so those students with the blue dot might need the most support, or maybe they need accommodations, read aloud or something. You could also flip that and have the SPED teacher be the one who is teaching the majority of the students, and maybe have the gen ed teacher pulling out students who need enrichment, so they need a little more advanced instruction or maybe have some more rigorous expectations. So it's not always the students with IEPs who are getting pulled out to a different table or an alternative way to teach. In fact, I encourage you to not always pull the students with disabilities out. I think it should be a variety based on, again, the topic and the standard. And then this one's the most savvy co-teaching model. It's actually teaming, in which both teachers are teaching at the same time. This takes a lot of practice and a lot of familiarity with your co-teacher, because you've got to learn that person's pet peeves and that person has to learn yours. But it's simultaneous. So, if you're teaching that math subject, you're both at the front, you're both walking around, you're both helping clarify and model and provide practice opportunities. This is really the most savvy way to co-teach. And then there's one teach, one assist. And so one is at the front or, leading the instruction or the content, and one is walking around. I do want to note whoever is assisting, I hope they're not just assisting those with IEPs. That assistant or that assistant teacher should be helping everyone who needs it and checking in on everyone. So one is leading the instruction and one is kind of helping spot check, maybe help keep students motivated and engaged, but they're helping all students, not just the ones identified with a disability. And so here is just another way to visualize the 6 models of co-teaching. So high leverage practice 2 deals with organizing and facilitating effective meetings with professionals and families. One of the biggest parts of your job will be interacting with families. They do know their child better than anyone. And so you'll be conducting IEP meetings. You'll be helping and gathering feedback from families to determine present levels. You'll be developing meeting agendas for these IEP meetings, allocating time to meet the goals of the agenda, and lead in ways that encourage consensus building through positive verbal and nonverbal communication. In other words, the parents aren't going to come in and you're not going to be a drill sergeant and say this is what your student needs and not get any feedback from them. It is an IEP team. Team is an important part of that phrase. Here's everyone who will be on the IEP team. So the student, obviously, as appropriate. Regular ed or gen ed teachers. You'll have local education agency or an LEA rep, and that's usually our administration. If the student's of transition age, you'll have a transition support person there. You'll have the parents. Anyone the parent wants, you'll have the SPED teacher. You might have related services providers. And if it's a new evaluation, you might have like a school psychologist to help interpret data. And high leverage practice 3 is collaborating with families to support student learning and secure needed services. So again, you're going to solicit information. You're going to communicate with them regularly. You're going to show respect and communicate effectively while considering the background, social, emotional, socioeconomic status, language, culture, and priorities of the family. Again, a huge part of your job will actually just be building rapport with the family and the people involved to try to support the student. So a family professional partnership is a relationship in which families, and it's not always just the parent or the guardian, and professionals agree to build on each other's experience and resources for the purpose of making and implementing decisions that will actually help the student. So there's no egos involved. It's all about the student and what we can do. So principles of effective partnerships include effective communication, professional competence, respect, commitment, equality, advocacy, and trust. So again, that building of rapport with these families will be so important to you when you become a first-year teacher. During your practicum, I hope you also get a chance to build relationship with families, go attend IEP meetings as appropriate and allowed with parent permission. That will help you build these skills. So as part of collaborating with families, they'll have homeschool communications. That might be newsletters, that might be an agenda. You'll have parent conferences. You might even provide some parent education. So you might provide some resources for families. You're going to encourage family involvement and engagement. And that could be through phone calls. It could be through text. It could be through Class Dojo, whatever it might be, in which something that you're comfortable with, but also the parents. Just really working on building those relationships. And so that is high leverage practice for collaboration. I will make 2 or 3 more videos for the other parts of high leverage practice or the other categories. And again, your huge artifact for this class will be a portfolio about how you collaborate, how you instruct, how you provide social, behavior, and emotional support, and how you assess your students.